topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Well, thank you and welcome. Welcome to Bill Martinez. Good to have you with us here. We're going to talk about the science and data-driven policing that does work. Dr. Currie Meyers is going to be joining us, and he points out that policing American cities is not easy, especially in areas with chronic and high rates of crime. But, there's a science and data-driven approach to policing that has tremendous potential for making neighborhoods safer. It's called law enforcement combined action teams, or LECATs for short. The retired sheriff, who has a combined 35 years of professional experience as a law enforcement officer at the local, state, and federal level, and as a criminologist, professor, and university executive, is here to explain. Dr. Currie Meyers, welcome to the show. Good to have you with us, sir.
Pleasure to be on. Thanks so much. Excited to join you.
Well, a lot of pain in River City, especially in these urban cities, in blue states particularly, that have gone absolutely vertical in terms of kind of crime. I mean, what was it last night? We just had, or yesterday, we had a congressman whose car was hijacked and by gun in Washington, D.C. And so this is supposedly a gun-free zone, Washington, D.C. So, it's equal opportunity. Nobody is protected.
Well, we start out gun-free zones. I make the argument on the gun. Whenever anybody brings up gun regulations or restrictions as the answer, my first response are criminals by nature do not follow laws. So
that seems like a pretty basic axiom in common sense.
It's pretty basic. So I want to pause people for, especially elected officials who think that they have the handle or the answer to everything that can be done legislatively. There are some things you just can't do, and what it ends up doing is the unintended consequences, which actually becomes an abridgment to the Second Amendment of the United States Constitution. So I know of we have gun laws on the books. My recommendation is that if you have a felon in possession, they should be charged with felon in possession of a firearm. If a person commits a crime with a firearm, there should be a charge. There is a charge, and there should be a charge against that person for possession of a weapon. And then naturally, if they use the weapon, that should be an additional charge, either additional charge or in sentencing, they use it as an enhancement to the sentencing of the charge. So let's stop trying to introduce more laws, and let's deal with the laws that are on the books.
Amen.
It seems like most of these folks don't want to, they actually don't want to enforce the laws that are against the criminals. Criminals, for some reason, have become victims, and victims have become criminals.
And look what's happening. It's the criminals that are running the streets of America. After George Floyd, we had the movement to defund police. And how's that working for you now, right?
Oh, my goodness. If you look at I don't know if they're unintended consequences or intended consequences. Some may argue that they're intended. But what's occurred as a result of the riots of 2020 has flipped the criminal justice system on its ear, which it should have never been intended to do. There are opportunities for improvement in law enforcement, and I write about this all the time in my Substack. That's drcurriemeyers.substack.com. So there's things that we can do better or different, but when you flip it on its ear and you have a defund movement, the cause and effect of that is we've had police officers leave in droves. We've had retirements. We've had early retirements. We've had senior field officers leave with 10, 15 years on the job.
Yeah.
and we have a problem actually bringing people into the profession. So this is something that can't be fixed immediately. We're going to feel the effects of this for decades to come.
No doubt about it. I mean, it's not like you can go down to, I keep telling our audience, it's not like you can go to Costco, go to aisle 15 and go find yourself a police officer with 15, 20 years worth of experience. And sadly, these police officers, for the most part, are gone. There's no return for them because too much is at risk. And they see how reckless these cities have become, and it puts them in jeopardy. And it protects the criminal, as you say. So who wants to be in that environment when you don't have a fair chance to be successful at doing a job, especially one that is as dangerous as being a police officer who is there to serve and protect?
And then woke politicians actually have doubled down on a lot of this. For instance, hiring standards in many urban sectors have been lowered, which is incredibly stupid. You want police officers to be at the highest level of ethics and morality because they have a difficult job and they're constantly exposed to nefarious actions and activity. So now they're actually letting some people who become police officers can have lower level felonies and still become a police officer. Well, what a lot of people may not realize is that a police officer has an enormous amount of data at their disposal to look up things about you. And it's important that those things be looked up only when they have a legal requirement to look those up.
Exactly.
There's intelligence reports, there's federal information, there's state information, there's local information. And someone who's up to no good is going to use that for bad things if they've been a bad actor in their previous life. So I caution, this is what happened in Memphis. Memphis lowered their standards instead of raised their standards. And of the 5 officers that were involved in the brutal beating of that one citizen, 3 of them were hired and had previous criminality associated with them.
You know, you talk about some of these cities having a hard time finding police officers. It was reported here recently the city of San Francisco has now gone out to Austin, Texas, to try to find potential law enforcement officers. So they're recruiting out of Texas, which is interesting because for many years, the governor of Texas recruited businesses out of California because of the tax advantages and, a market that supported businesses. So I find it ironic that now you've got a city in California is so desperate that they're willing to, try to recruit out of Austin, not having a great amount of success, by the way, because these kids are smart enough to figure out that if they go there, they're going to have to deal with a very liberal state where, the kind of woke policies that you've referred to run quite rampant.
Well, if any police officer that leaves the state now, Austin has its own woke issues.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
And they're finding out too. They're dealing with those, and they're starting to ratchet back a little bit because it's hurt their department significantly. And their police chief just resigned not too long ago as a result of it. But police officers are not going to go to California. They're not going to go to Oregon. They're not going to go to Washington. They're not going to go to Minneapolis. They're not going to go to New York. They're not going to go to Illinois. I can go down a whole litany of places. And it's because number one, the department has to back them. And I'm not saying back them when they're doing something wrong. I'm talking about be supportive of law enforcement and ensure that they get the right kind of training. They get the right budgets. They get to do the right things and be held accountable. The other thing is no police officer wants to go to a state where there isn't enforcement of the law. And if prosecutors aren't enforcing the law and judges aren't sentencing once somebody gets convicted appropriately, then police officers are going to say, I'm out of here. Yeah. And so it's actually worked. We have in the Midwest, we have recruited a number of New York City police officers. I know Florida has been very successful in bringing officers down and even giving them stipends for, they used to never, it was, back when I was a police officer back in the 80s and 90s, it was extremely unusual for a police officer to leave to go to another state, because generally you had to start back over.
Yes.
You didn't get, your pay started over, your tenure started over, your seniority, all those kinds of things, Bill. And you know what they're doing now? They're bringing you in at a higher level, equal or if not more to the pay that you once had. And they're also bringing you in with the seniority that you had at that department in many ways.
Why not? Why
Plus,
not? I think that's smart. You've got an asset there with these men and women with all the experience, like we referred to. You can't train somebody and deposit into their brain and into their every aspect of who they are 15 years worth of experience. That's something you have to do on the job, out on the field, not something that I can dump into your skull in a classroom.
Well, it probably takes somewhere in the neighborhood of $200,000 to $250,000 to train a police officer up to be at the level that you want them in. And that includes the first year, not only going through the academy, going through the equipment expense, going through all the ride-alongs, ensuring that their partners looking at them and observing them and making sure that they do better. Extra training that occurs. It's extremely expensive.
Exactly.
And you would much rather hire people that already have that training and basically have introduced them to your own, specific laws of the state that you're going to, and maybe SOPs of your organization, as opposed to completely start over. And I will tell you, Bill, one of my biggest concerns, especially in the urban sectors, is they have a depletion of law enforcement officers. We're going to see elected officials rely on fines, fees, and forfeitures to supplant police budgets. And what that means is it's using police as a form of revenue. So I give Chicago as a perfect example, where they put up somewhere in the neighborhood of 250 to 500 cameras alone on the streets and highways. And their primary mission was to use it for using fines to supplant the police budget. The police department they don't believe in that.
Yes,
but
right.
The mayor at that time, Lori Lightfoot, approved that, and they had cameras anywhere. And if you want to talking about an abridgment to freedom, then all of a sudden you get a bill in the mail for $150 or $200 because you supposedly were driving too fast. And oh, by the way, Lori Lightfoot lowered the miles per hour that a ticket could be given, so there more of them could be given. So I am a big believer that a police officer, if you're going to get cited or arrested, it needs to be by a well-trained police officer in person.
Well, and I also maintain that you need to have some sort of remedy to where if you want to challenge said ticket, that you can.
Absolutely.
Here recently, I got to tell you, Dr. Myers, I was in a small city in Georgia, and a bus, it was a 3-lane road on each side. So 6 lanes total, 3 lanes. I'm on the inside lane. The bus is way off to the right, lower right, out of the way. I'm we're there visiting, and I go driving down the road, and in less than, I would say less than 30 seconds, as I'm passing the bus, all of a sudden the stop sign flips out, right? Well, their algorithms in their system registers that as an offense. Now, I'm not anywhere close to the bus. The bus is way off to the right. And there's no way, even if I'd have seen the sign and slammed my brakes on, I probably would have caused an accident. It was crazy. And then when I called them, because they sent me a notice, a notice of violation, and I tried to, call the clerk. The clerk says, well, it's not in our venue. We're not the ones that are purview. We're not the ones that handle it. It's the company that issued the ticket, which was a company out in Texas. And so I tried to contact them, and they claimed they didn't have the ability to do anything with it, that I had to go back to the county clerk, went back to the clerk, and it was just one big, frustrating circle of and waste of time. And I still haven't gotten this thing resolved. And because I've, just out of principle, it's almost, because even the clerk, they did pull up the video and they says, yeah, we see your deal. She said, but we can't do anything about it.
Well, and for them not to be able to do it, if that was set up that way, that's absolutely wrong. I'm against camera use for violations to begin with.
Right.
But if it's going to be set up where you got to go to a corporation to get this, but
the corporation says they're not empowered to do that. So then you have to,
you got finger pointing back and forth.
Yeah, you have to set up a court date. That's like 14, 15 hours away one way, or 12 hours that I'd have to drive, up there, and you have to be there in person. There's nothing, you can't even do a Zoom meeting or have a conference call with anybody who could adjudicate, a $250 fine. So they're counting on that you just, you surrender, you send the $250 and, move on.
Well, and the other thing is what they hope, they don't expect people like you to fight it. You are, but the vast majority of people don't have the time. They're not willing to invest the time, and they end up going to, they'll usually contact the prosecutor and get the charge reduced to something that's not going to affect their license. And they pay, twice as much for the fine. And so the city still makes money on those kinds of things. This is one of those opportunities for improvement I write about a lot. And I caution people, because I'm starting to see more and more of it. Number one, because the city, not counties, you don't see sheriffs doing this, you don't see states doing this, but by and large, cities are the ones that supplant their budgets with fines in particular.
Yeah.
Fees and forfeitures affect all agencies, but fines in particular generally are in city departments.
Right. When you were talking about, these states in cities that people, particularly police officers, are shunning, it seems that the thing that they have in common is that they're run by the Democrats. They are woke, and they are putting their very citizens in jeopardy here, as the crime rates in blue states versus red states, so to speak, have continued to, to increase dramatically. And I don't know how much more of this the American people at large, especially those residing in blue states, are going to tolerate this. Although, it's clear that some people have already had enough. They're moving out of New York. They're moving out of Illinois if they can afford to. California, I think U-Haul says that is their number one state of truck rentals, moving one way out of the state of California. So people are voting with their feet. But it's much, much more diabolical than just, what's happening, because it seems like this is systemic, Dr. Meyers. You've been studying this, because, whether or not we're looking at, this portion of the deep state, which is law enforcement, our attorney general, the FBI, the shenanigans they've been doing, they've been getting away with, and how more and more corrupt they seem to be. This is sending the wrong message out to other people in law enforcement, I believe, and it's giving the wrong impression to everyday citizens that, they're not able to trust law enforcement.
Well, about 1% of the counties are responsible for 40% of the homicides that are occurring in the United States of America. 1% of counties. So that will tell you a lot. And those 1% of counties are all, not partially, all of the 1% I'm talking about are administered by leftist politicians. I'm not going to say Democrats anymore, because there is no Democrat that's running things anymore. It's people that have decided to do woke criminal justice policy. So it's when you look at that number in itself, there's still crime in other areas of the country. There's still homicides that occur in other parts of the country, but our crime would not be significant if it wasn't for the 1% of counties that have actually taken their eye off the ball, and they've decided to decriminalize virtually everything.
Right. And in doing that, they have incentivized all the wrong behavior. And the matrix is quite clear. I mean, you look at the numbers, the empirical evidence is quite resounding, isn't it?
Well, the whole process of corrections is to correct people. Mm-hmm. And if you don't correct people, then there's no carrot and stick to ensure that people are going to do right. Listen, humans by nature are going to try to get away with something, especially if we have a lack of what I call the three-legged stool of success, right, which is the lack of family, faith, and formation. And, right, the more family and faith and formation gets minimized or mitigated or reduced with a person, the more that they lose touch with the boundaries that they're supposed to have, the civic nature that they're supposed to have, and they're more inclined to commit crime.
Exactly.
And so and then you throw that in itself, which is really a social contagion that's going on. That's one. You have the defund police problem, which is two, which means we have less police officers on the street and less funding for those police officers. So you have that as second. You have the third is that we've had woke prosecutors decided to apply cashless bail uniformly almost for every crime that's committed, which that's not what cashless bail should have been designed to do. I have no problem with understanding cashless bail. If you're a one-time offender, if you don't have a criminal history, this country wants to give you an opportunity to succeed. Right. If you commit crime and continually to commit crime, then you have to suffer the ramifications for those crimes. And then last, if you decriminalize everything, then what are you going to arrest people for to keep, to actually have that carrot and stick?
Exactly. Why do you even bother to have a police force?
Yeah, just recently, Bill, just recently in Seattle, one of the teenagers that was arrested for a murder charge, the judge sentenced him gave him no bail. So he did the right thing, but it's a homicide for Pete's sake.
Oh, wow.
The teenager was stunned and said, "You mean I don't get home detention?" And said that. And it's almost like the expectation now is you are going to get out regardless of the crime that you commit. And if you there's two things to committing crime. If you're a violent offender, you should, under most cases, bail should be extremely high or not granted if you have a significant criminal history. And the other thing is, if you have a significant criminal history and you commit a low-level offense, then that is where you need to pause about bail, and the judge should really reflect whether or not it's appropriate to let somebody out. But we have, and the judges follow the guidance of the prosecutors, and so that means prosecutors need to say more, "Oh, judge, we're not going to have any, we expect no bail for this person." Right. They need to stand up and actually put these guardrails in, and it's automatically going to make the streets safer. But
you're putting it on the prosecutors, but where are the judges? I mean, there has been an infiltration of liberal judges that have taken over. I mean, under this current administration, they're rather activist in nature, which is just adding to the problem. And as you say, promoting these criminals. Now, it's like the victims. I mean, everything's been turned upside down. It's like the victims are the criminals, and and the criminals become the victims. It's so bizarre that where even in some of these cities, like we talked about, you can steal up to $999. I mean, I don't know who's running the tab.
Yeah. California it's even higher.
Yeah, but I mean, and without peril, without any consequence whatsoever. So then what happens? You get more of the same, and now you're getting the net effect of these businesses saying, "I'm out of here." I can't make money here. I mean, it's tough enough when you're having to deal with, some petty theft. But now this is amounting into the billions of dollars. It's costing these big chains who hire local people and they can't afford it anymore. So they've allowed the judges, the prosecutors, the system is crippling these local businesses.
No, I agree. And Bill, I didn't mean to refer that the judges don't have an involvement at this at all.
No, I didn't take it that way, but I just,
because I agree with you, because the judges are lawyers just like the prosecutor, and many of them come from the same woke ilk in these urban areas, and they actually believe what they believe. It does take, if a prosecutor is not going to recommend bail, then it's very important for a judge to pause and say, what are you doing?
Right.
And no, we're this person.
Well, kind of like what happened with Hunter Biden, right? The judge read the settlement and said, have you ever seen anything like this? This is insane, right?
Yeah, which they didn't before. I mean, not the same judge, but a judge before apparently was okay with some of the things that were going on. So yes, absolutely. And I just wrote a Substack on, you mentioned businesses.
Yes.
I just wrote a Substack on the unintended consequences of crime on businesses. Mm-hmm. And it's astounding what's going on. And the public sees it, you see it, but we have a large amount of criminal activity that's going unabated. And as a result, what does the business community do? They start looking at their bottom line. And if they know we're somewhere in the neighborhood of over $100 billion in losses just in this year alone. It's increased significantly. And most of this has occurred starting from about 2019 on. Mm-hmm. And that's when crime started to spike. So a lot of people think it was just because of the riots. We saw a little bit of this prior to the riots in 2019, and then the riots just opened the floodgates. But businesses are going to say, I'm only going to take the loss for so much, and at some point it makes more money for me to shut down and not even operate than to operate. Yeah. And so what we're doing is, just recently, I think we've seen 9 Target stores all in urban sectors that are closing. We saw Walmart's follow the same thing. We've even seen places like Starbucks who have supported these movements. Target, by the way, supported the movements too. So they're feeling the consequences for their support. And then the other thing is, if you look at Washington, D.C., I find this fascinating. So Washington, D.C. it's a heck hole. I mean, people are having a hard time there not being with. There was just a reporter killed last night in an in-home invasion. There's a 400% increase in carjackings that are occurring in those areas. The high murder rate. It's and I love Washington, D.C. It used to be one of my favorite places to go visit. Right. And because I'm a historian, and I just, when I'm there, it's just a special place, and it's been turned into a place where people don't want to go. And there are now, so politicians did this by having woke criminal justice policy, and then businesses react by saying, I'm leaving, or in a lot of them have said, well, we're not going to take cash anymore because a lot of the cash is causing more crime. And so the city of Washington, D.C. just put out just this.
Yeah, I just saw that on your Substack.
And they said you've got to allow cash now. And so the businesses don't know what to do, because if you have cash, you have more cash management issues. Don't forget about internal theft. Exactly. A lot of these thieves are internal employees, because it's hard to hire good people. So it's some point.
You see, all that you're talking about here, when you talk about, the 3-legged stool and all, it all sits on the foundation of what John Adams said. And that is that our Constitution is made for a moral and righteous people. Okay. You take morality out of the picture and you allow people to run rampant like they are right now, the Constitution is imploding. It's falling on itself. The mere weight and lack of moral authority and moral foundation is just allowing the foundation of the Constitution to implode on itself.
Well, anytime you have this lack of faith in family and formation, it begins to develop into moral relativism.
Exactly.
And moral relativism, as it, it's kind of like communism. Sometimes when you look up the definition, you go, oh, I wish everybody could do what they do. It's such a perfect world and all these kinds of things. But ultimately, you become self-absorbed in moral relativism, and the other person no longer counts.
Well, nobody's accountable under that kind of thinking.
Exactly, and it leads to anarchy.
Yes,
and most importantly, when you couple that with the fact that we don't have families and we don't have faith. The first thing is faith, family, and formation. So we have to have a faith understanding that we're serving something greater than ourselves.
Exactly.
And there's guidelines to follow. And I would say God was the first football coach because the 10 Commandments gave us, we know what to do.
God created the playing field. Currie.
That's right. So
come on.
Follow that. But we know that we're broken as humans, and we know that we sin and we make these mistakes. But understanding and knowing that you've committed sinful behavior, we have people today that don't know that they're committing sinful behavior.
Right.
When you and I might view those different. So that's one thing. And then if you look at the family, we have fatherlessness that is an all-time high.
Exactly.
In the Black community, it's 80%.
Right.
And then
that's brought to you by government bureaucracies and their idea that they could do a better job.
Yeah.
And so here it is, Reagan's warning, I'm here from the government and I'm here to help, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And look how much they've helped these Black families in promoting fatherlessness and single motherhood and abortion and on and on.
Right. So when you have that lack, you have the lack of faith, you don't have families anymore that are intact. Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, who's going to form your children?
Yes.
So the formation of that child, you don't have a father giving guidelines, giving boundaries, holding people accountable. You don't have a mother often that's giving that love, providing the boundaries that she provides.
Right.
So we have children in today's world. It's not necessarily their fault. We have children in today's world that are lost.
Yes.
And they don't know where to go. So the only really places that they can go are, in my opinion, two different areas. And one is the internet. Mm-hmm. And the other one is in groups,
right?
Because observational learning is how we are formed if we're not given guardrails.
Now, consider this for just a moment, just as you laid this out, Dr. Currie Meyers, who is our guest right now. He's a former law enforcement officer at local, state, and federal levels. Consider this. Add to the mix now the millions of illegal migrants who have come across the border illegally and that are beholden to cartels. How is that going to add to the problems that we are currently experiencing in the local communities, especially when you talk about formation?
So, Bill, it's become a perfect storm because all the stuff we're talking about is already insane. And then, oh, by the way, we're also going to have no borders.
Yeah.
And so we have people coming into this country. There are many people that want to come to this country because they want to escape lawlessness, ruthlessness. I get that. But let's make it simple for a second. If we have 10 million people come into this country and even 5% are up to criminal no good, imagine the number that is.
Oh, yeah. It's huge.
And the fact that and I'm talking about now, I believe it's higher because we really don't know the backgrounds that are going on. And we're seeing the killer that just escaped in Pennsylvania not too long ago was wanted for murder and actually served time and murder for Brazil. And what a lot of people, once again, do not realize is in South America and Central America, and to some extent the islands of the Caribbean, like Cuba, for instance, and Haiti, they are letting out their prisons and letting out their jails first.
Well, Trump was right when he said they're not sending their best, are they?
No. And those are proven facts. It's not innuendo. Those are the people that's being let out. If you look at, for every 100 people that cross the border, 90% of them are young single males that are crossing in the border. Now, let's take it a step further. If we want to cause terrorism, what's the best way to infiltrate and come into this country? Well, you use the lax immigration system to come in to the border. So we have Middle Eastern terrorist organizations. We have the Chinese military are all specifically coming into this country through the border and setting up in different areas of this country. So we know specifically for the Chinese, before we had a balloon, for Pete's sake, go over, a spy balloon, go over and hover over very sensitive things. Let's say that we have just 5,000 Chinese soldiers that's nothing compared to the millions of people that have crossed in. So there's a very good chance we have 5,000 highly trained Chinese soldiers that have come into this country illegally, and they've set up locations. We know that the Chinese have set up police departments, for Pete's sake, in America, their own police departments, and they're setting up to spy on people and to potentially do intelligence gathering on soft targets and be involved in criminal activity themselves. So
it only took 19 on 9/11, right?
Exactly. That's exactly true. So we have that in the Middle Eastern terrorist organization. So you throw the borders, and we have fentanyl I consider it a poison. It is a drug, but it's being sent to us by the Chinese in working with the cartels of the Mexican drug trafficking organizations, purposely to send into the United States as a poison to get people addicted, because it's one dropper full is the cut for, if literally 20 pounds could kill an entire state of fentanyl. So it's an amazing amount of fentanyl that can be used.
We're losing, I don't know, I've heard numbers anywhere from 70 to 100,000 people overdose on fentanyl. I mean, this is, in a sense, it's a form of biological warfare that is being executed by the communist Chinese. That's the point of origin. But, the communist Chinese, they got away with COVID. They're getting away with this. And then cartels are building up an infrastructure within our country. It's not just on the other side of the border. People think, oh, well, the cartels, they stop. No, they are they're about in every state of the union. They have operations for drug running, for human trafficking, for sex trafficking of young girls. Oh, by the way, this is all going on here in our country, and this is all being done on purpose, by design. This is not by accident. What the current administration is doing to this country, all I can figure, Dr. Meyers, is they must hate America so bad that when it all started with Barack Obama, when he talked about the fundamental transformation of America. Well, you're seeing it right now. This is the next phase of the fundamental transformation that he talked about.
Well, I think people will do anything to bad people will do anything to stay in power.
Yes.
And use that power against you, and including and we don't know what kind of alignments that people may have with the Chinese. There's a lot of money out there, and people, if you have no morals and no values, you're going to get aligned towards that money. And we already have, and we've seen, it's one of the accusations in the Biden crime family is the potentially payments from Chinese. So how do you look the other way in some of these things on purposely? Those are all questions that have to be asked. I emphatically can't say yes, but I certainly can't say no.
Right.
And so you never know what kind of people have been bought off. And you have that. I mean, we had a U.S. senator just the other day in New Jersey that, again, he gets his day in trial, but he has been accused of taking money from the Egyptians and giving, and again, he's been accused of it. So he gets his day in court. But the whole purpose of getting that money was to funnel intelligence back to the Egyptians. So
exactly. Well, Dr. Meyers, you've had so much experience, and you talk about formation. You can see how things are lining up. And our political system has been so compromised. I mean, Peter Schweitzer, Miranda Devine, there's been extensive writing and research on this of our elected officials being captured. Trevor Loudon, who's done a lot of vetting, in fact, wrote a recent book just citing 15 elected senators who are compromised. He said even earlier in an interview that I had with him that in the House there's over 100 card-carrying communist Democrats who are in our government. So they're well entrenched. It is a shock to me. You wonder, you go, how can these people put their hand on the Bible and swear to defend our Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic? How can they take that kind of oath when they know in their hearts of hearts they're lying through their teeth?
Yeah, not just elected officials, but it's people that they've hired to now work in the government, and you can't get them out.
Yeah, it's all part of the cabal. I mean, you know, Barack Obama, when he left office, in order to secure his legacy, he made sure, I think it was 4,000 of his people that were, you know, part of the bureaucracy or part of his administration, so that they would not lose their job. He moved them, he conveniently and strategically moved them into government service so that they would maintain a position within the government and set up these, as you say, these guardrails, to produce a specific result that had nothing to do with our Constitution, but had everything to do with this diabolical plan to bring America down.
Well, and the hiring process again has changed so much. I mean, you go back to when I was hired. Significant backgrounds were done, and anything that would come up would basically ultimately jeopardize the opportunity to work. And now, there are many mental health issues that people have. They're getting hired. There's different types of perversions going on. They still get hired because apparently everything's okay that you can do.
Right.
And there's nothing wrong. You're okay. I'm okay. And
your truth is your truth, and my truth is everything's all relative.
I mean, there's things in the DSM, when I went to school and as a criminologist and studied the DSM-4, that said it was abhorrent and against the common good, are perfectly allowed now. We're at a point where we even want to give children the right to change their sex and change their gender without parent notification. That's how far we've gone down in a slippery slope compared to 20 years ago, where if you cross-dress, you wouldn't have even been able to get hired as a federal agent.
Yeah. How, and the thing is so amazing. Everybody's head is spinning, Dr. Meyers, because this has happened with such rapidity. I mean, this hasn't taken, decades. It almost seems like this radical sexual, I call it perversion. I know some people might take exception to that, but my definition, it is a demonstration of perversion to do what we're doing, and also criminal to, for schools to do this to kids without parental notification and on and on. But I mean, this has happened in such a short period of time. And I guess we can be grateful for COVID, because COVID exposed that, didn't it?
Yeah, it did expose a lot of things. As a matter of fact, a big concern of mine is using public health to enforce certain criminal statutes or to try to affect public policy a certain way.
Right.
We saw that with mask mandates, where many of the mayors, woke mayors, and some of the woke governors wanted to use police to enforce masking. We've seen it with whether or not shots have been done, whether or not your group separations to occur. And most recently, we saw the New Mexico governor try to enforce Second Amendment bans based on public health, which is incredible. Luckily, a federal judge struck that down, but my goodness, it takes a federal judge to strike that down. She should have been run out of her state on rails to begin with. So that's the kind of stuff we're seeing. And when you don't have those boundaries, again, you don't have that faith, family, and formation, our kids are going to get lost into the internet and into group activities. And that's where the dark psychological traits can really fester and come out in somebody. And so I think we're seeing an increase, especially in the dark tetrads, which is Machiavellianism, narcissism, certain psychopathies, and sadism. And then when you think of psychopathies, think of like the overabundance of the 7 deadly sins, if you will, to make it easy.
Right.
And then sadism. And then, so, and in particular, young adult boys can become sucked into the dark tetrads. And we're seeing that with the use of internet. And you think of internet and group violence, we're seeing all-time high of group violence. We're seeing groups doing, it used to be shoplifting was one person, 2 people. We're seeing shoplifting where 50 people, 100 people will come into a store and just rampage it. We're seeing carjackings that are done by groups of people.
Exactly.
We're seeing robberies done by groups, home invasions done by groups, burglaries done by groups. Never before have we seen that kind of group behavior where you can be de-individualized, where you can be lost in anonymity, and you can kind of disappear. And people, guess what they're doing? They're masking up because we allowed masks to occur. And the whole purpose of masking up is to conceal one's identity.
Exactly.
So it's never ending.
Well, this is a generational issue. This isn't going to be something we correct overnight. I think this could take a long time, to right the ship. Dr. Currie Meyers, we've got about 3.5 minutes remaining here. I want to give you an opportunity to, summarize what we've talked about, to talk about solutions. What can we do? Because we need to do something systematic to offset this insanity that's happening. And it starts with one citizen at a time being courageous enough to know what it is that they believe in and what they stand for and for whom they're standing.
Oh, definitely. And first, thank you so much. It's an honor to be on your show. And the fact that I'm able to give a long interview with you means so much, to give context to people on how important it is. So I'm really blessed that you have this kind of forum to get the word out. So thank you, number one, for that. But I think that's one thing that we need to do. The really good part about social media and the internet, it can be used for good, like this.
Yes.
Where more people are able to see real life things and discussions that are going on, and not listen to certain types of media that portray it. So that's the first thing. The second thing, from a law enforcement point of view, we really need to focus on violent crime. Recidivism for violent crime is high. It's about 60% for offenders that get out within their first 3 years. They'll reoffend. It goes to 70. I'm talking about violent offenders, not all criminals. Violent offenders will go to about 70%. If you're under the age of 25, it skyrockets to 80% will reoffend when they get back out. So the data is overwhelming that we need to focus on recidivism and violent crime first and foremost. Second is we need to fund police appropriately, and we need to get back to the levels of police and ensure that we're supporting them, holding them accountable naturally, but supporting them for the work that they do. Third is that we cannot have cashless bail reform applied unitarily for everything. That's insane. There's a time for cashless bail. Generally, that time is for somebody who's a first-time offender. Other than that, other people should suffer going through the ramifications of bail and not be let out if they reach certain markers. Judges have a responsibility to sentence people for, and the problem is the legislatures often have addressed this, but many prosecutors and judges are departing from what the legislature wants to do on their own. So that's one of the issues.
Exactly.
Not third, I think I'm down to 6 or 7. We have a mental health crisis in this country, and we need to stop enabling people with mental health crises. And that's what we're doing. We're letting homeless people in camp. We're letting drug addicts in camp, and we're saying, you're fine, go hang out in that park.
Exactly.
We're going to leave you alone. That is the most horrific public policy I've ever heard of in my life. And think of the crime. Think of the abuse that people get. Think of the sexual abuse that women are having.
Oh my goodness.
In those areas. Think
Oh,
of
the communities.
We're having third world diseases, for Pete's sake, pop up because the encampments and plus the illegal aliens that are bringing in third world diseases that are left untreated. So if we have encampments like that, they have to be cleared out, that there's a place that they have to go.
Exactly.
And once they get arrested or put into the system, they need to either be given to mental health practitioners or given to treatment programs so they can get the help that they need. And if you're a supplier, you go to jail and then go to prison if you're found guilty of it. Mm-hmm. The other thing is the Black community I feel so badly for them because a lot of the defund movement particularly affects them because there's no police officers on the street. And you talked about businesses. The first place businesses are going to leave is the urban sectors. Right. And then you're going to turn into food deserts, medical deserts, where they're not going to be able to think of the people that are 60 or 70 that are living in the urban sector. They can't afford to leave. They have no place to go. And now their grocery store is closed. Their pharmacy is closed. Their doctor has moved on. They have no place to go. And so we've got to get our urban sectors back under control, or it's going to look like the old movie Escape from New York.
Yeah, exactly.
And then last but not least, Bill, it goes back to what you and I have been talking about from the beginning. This starts at home. It starts with faith, having a faith life that you're serving something greater than yourself. It doesn't mean a particular religiosity. That's up to the individual to pick. But you're serving something greater than yourself, and you have a commitment to faith. Family is next. If you're a dad today watching this, you have a responsibility to take care of your family. Yeah. Sometimes that means you can't do what you may want to do in life. Yeah. Your family comes first, and then last but not least is how are you going to form your children into good, great Americans in the future who want to serve and protect, have humility, and be understanding of their neighbor. And if we have that, we can go in the right direction. But, all those things I just unpacked, that's a big matzo ball.
Yeah, exactly. One step at a time. It is a process, no doubt. Dr. Currie Meyers, thank you so much for being with us. Dr. Meyers, a retired sheriff who has a combined 35 years of professional experience as a law enforcement officer at the local, state, and federal level, and as a criminologist, professor, and university executive. Dr. Meyers, again, thank you for being with us. So much appreciate your insight and experience. Take care.
Yeah, Bill, God bless you. Thanks so much.
Again, our thanks to Dr. Currie Meyers for being with us today. For more information to be a part of this mighty movement to return to God and to save our country, go to BillMartinezShow.com. May God bless you and keep you. Make his face shine upon you. May he be gracious unto you and give you peace. Go and be blessed. Thank you so much for being with us. Have a great day.